All right, hello everyone. This is Josh, also known as Yashu. You're just tuning into episode 102 of the TLOY Talks podcast. You can get this on all platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Buzzsprout, much more. You can get this on like Patreon as well too. So basically, when you sign up for the Patreon too, you get like early access to content and all that sort of stuff too. And I'm just gonna definitely get it like started right here. So. He's a songwriter and producer who's worked with the likes of Sony ATV, Warner, Def Jam, and much more. Has like performed like all over the world. Like has been touring with the likes of like Alicia Keys and like OneRepublic and much more. Has been in like many like writing sessions with like a lot of like well-known Canadian acts and with international acts too. Has written some of like your favorite songs as well too, and just like has been like a mentor within like guiding people within like how to survive in the music industry, how to get into the music industry, and much more in social media and much more. So we have Andre Kaden Black in the building. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah. Now I definitely had to like tap in, like, as like earlier, like I was like checking out like one of your podcasts and like just like with the other stuff too. And it is like very educational on how to like make it in the music industry too. And like even like seeing your reels too, which is like kind of like amazing to see and all that, how to learn all that type of stuff,
Thank you very much. I put a lot of time into them.
Yeah. Likewise, man. And I want to like get like started right here. So where did you grow up, and did that place have like a very big like music scene?
Yeah. So when I was really young, I was brought up by a single mother, and we traveled a lot. She was going to school and everything. So I didn't really get stationary until probably grade 3 or 4. And we resided in Burlington, which is a suburb out of Toronto. And, Burlington had, when I grew up, a booming music scene. A lot of bands and artists actually came out of that city in the late 90s. It was great. It was great for local artists to grow at that time. So, yeah.
Okay. And like, as far as like your first like memories of music, like what were they like in a sense?
First memories, like when I was really young. Oh God. First memories of music, that's going back. I remember being a really young boy listening to my mother's records, whether it was everything from, Elvis to, Julio Iglesias was in there,
Yeah.
But a lot of, and then growing up, obviously, getting into a lot of the rock scene. So it was the 80s. So, it was pop and rock. So everything from Wham to Def Leppard to the hair metal bands, all that stuff.
Okay.
So.
And like as far as like, with music and everything else too, and like even with your childhood, would you say like some of your key focal points in your childhood would be like within music? And was that like probably like one of the best experiences you've kind of had like growing up?
What do you mean? Like
your childhood, like in a sense too. So like, did it like mainly stem from like music or sports or anything else too?
Yeah, man. I was just so enthralled in music, especially like throughout the 90s. It was just everything to me.
Okay.
I was in a band, and being in a band back then, it was something special because, going into a studio and recording your record and getting it pressed and all that kind of stuff was expensive, and it was hard. It was difficult to do. So it wasn't like today. So it was a different time. And I feel like the art and the music in the 90s were different as well compared to a lot of the post-millennial releases. So yeah, it was an amazing time for me, and I'll never forget it. And I think it did shape a lot of who I am artistically and culturally. So.
Yeah, no, likewise, because like I know like around that time too, just to add on, like there were like a lot of like people like starting like their own bands too from the garage and all that. Like a lot of like shows like happening all over the city too. Like even ones where they've had like riots and all that too, like Guns N' Roses and like all those other artists too, like coming to Toronto and Montreal trying to do shows, and then like it get canceled, and then people would like riot and stuff like that too. And like even like iconic moments like Biggie like Smalls like being in Toronto, Britney Spears performing at like a mall. It's
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, very cool time. And very, I feel extremely fortunate to have grown up and experienced that culture. So
Okay.
pretty digital. Yeah.
Sounds great. And I wanted to ask, like, how did you get into like producing and like songwriting? Because like those are like two of your biggest like strengths like within music. And what event or time in your life made you decide in pursuing it like full time?
There wasn't an event. Like I always felt like I wanted to do this. Ever since I was like a very small child, I knew I wanted to be artistic. I knew from a very young age, even when I was in bands, when I was 11 years old, I knew that I wanted to play in bands and write music and eventually hit the top of the totem pole, which in my eyes at that time was production. So it's like back in the day, I felt, now it's a little different, a lot different, but back in the day, um, I mean, from my perspective, producers were like the top of the totem pole. Like you heard their style and what they did to artists throughout their records. So I was a fan of not only bands, but I was also a big fan of producers. And I knew what Rick Rubin was doing, or, or Butch Vig, or whoever it was. For me, I was not only a big fan of the band, but I was like, oh yeah, so-and-so produced this, like Sylvia Massey produced this, or whoever it was. Because at the back of a CD cover, it would always be in big bold letters at the bottom, produced by, and mixed by, or whoever it is. So for me, growing up, it was like, I want to do all the cool things of being in a band. But then at the very end of my journey, I want to be that guru producer. You know what I mean? Since I was like 9, 10, 11 years old, I always knew kind of what I wanted, and I guess somehow manifested my journey into reality. And I wake up every single morning so grateful for the life that I'm living right now, and it's very humbling for me.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing like experience like to kind of like hear and like just like understand too. And like as far as like, even with artists or genres too, like when you first started producing and like, even like songwriting, like who were you like mainly like influenced by?
Yeah, my influences spawn through many genres. Anything from I lived through the Britpop explosion. I was a big Oasis fan, and we just got news today that they're reuniting, which is amazing. I was big into, Pearl Jam, Nirvana was a big influence for me. A lot of punk rock, that culture was big for me. Hip hop was big for me as well. I had a very wide genre influence that came to me. I was very lucky to be open to many different artists growing up. So it was and also the 90s were part of the Canadian explosion. You had a lot of bands out of Canada that were doing really well in the States, like Our Lady Peace, Tea Party, Big Wreck, Moist, all these bands in the 90s, which, I grew up getting to play with and getting to work with a lot of these people. And at that point, when I was started to open or play with or work with some of these bands, at a very young age, I was like, okay, like, I'm doing something right here.
Yeah.
So
that's facts. Like, because I know they had like Bare Naked Ladies and like Alanis like Morissette too, and then I think also like Billy Talent, like they were like also on the rise too. Like Avril Lavigne, like a lot came from like the late '90s, early 2000s, and like that rise just kind of became like bigger from there too. And then there were like other genres that were on the come up too, like with hip hop, rap, R&B, all that type of stuff too. So
yeah, I remember Billy Talent before they were Billy Talent. They were called Pez, and they used to open up for my old band back at old venues like Ted's Wrecking Yard in Toronto and stuff. So
true.
It was quite the experience, let me tell you. It was a very vibrant Toronto music scene.
That's facts, man. And actually, you were actually signed to like an Asian like record label too. So tell me more about that and what was that like, and what were like the key differences and similarities like that you've noticed like being signed?
That was amazing. So after the first band I was in, Left Pensy, that band ended up breaking up, and we did some great things with that band. And then I ended up starting another band and a couple other bands. And the next one that signed a record deal was a band called Dearest. And, we were auditioning a bunch of bass players for that band. And we found one that we really liked. And he was in another band called The Weeknd before The Weeknd. It was spelled differently too. And they were signed to a record deal in Asia. And he shopped our current band after doing a record in London with Dan Broadbeck.
Okay.
He shopped our stuff to this label in Indonesia, in Asia. And they loved it, so they brought us down, and we spent 2 years touring, and they had crazy connections. They got us some of the biggest shows I've ever been to, some of the biggest festivals and opening acts, and that's kind of how we spent our time, was playing and touring and jumping on planes every day.
Okay.
And it was a very, very crazy experience.
Oh, that's facts, man. And as far as like, like even like performing, like what was like your favorite like city to perform at, like just like even from being in that label?
Yeah, there wasn't a favorite city. I mean, they were all really cool in their own way. But Bali was really special. There's some really cool stories from there. Singapore was really, really interesting. We played this massive festival called Singfest. And yeah, I mean, those just come off the top of my head. China was very interesting. We played the University of Hong Kong, and that was a very fun show. That was actually our first show of one of the tours.
Okay.
But yeah, many, many memories and great venues.
Okay, that's facts, man. And I actually forgot to like ask this like very like earlier on, like what was like the first like CD that you've like ever bought like for your own money, and was it something that you still hold on to this day and all that?
First CD. Well, I probably still have it in a box somewhere in storage. I don't remember what was the first CD I purchased. I don't remember that.
Or just like the CD that you've had like greatest like memories with. You've played it like.
Oh man, I have so many. I mean, Pearl Jam's one of them when I was young.
All right.
Third Eye Blind was a big influence in the '90s as well. So I mean, there's too many to list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So just like moving forward for a bit too. So what's your creative process like when producing and like songwriting, and like what would like a day in the studio be like?
Yeah. So we work a little differently than most production teams. I work with an amazing team, and we look at songwriting and developing a little differently. For me, I think the most important aspect of an artist is their songs and their construction of how they're written and their hooks, their melodies, and how strong they are and how authentic they are. And there are other things that are important like branding and stuff, but when it comes down to it, we all listen to music because we want to feel something. We want to feel a cerebral experience that makes us feel like we're familiar with, that emotion. So the only way to really pull that out of artists is to get them to write the most authentic songs they possibly can. And for me, the first deal of business, I think the most important thing is making sure that the artists that we're working with are writing songs that really mean something to them. And I know that sounds simple, but it's really not as easy as people think, especially working in a team environment. Pouring your heart out and talking about, some of the really painful experiences that you've had might be a little uncomfortable. And the only way to get, and it doesn't have to be painful, like it could be happy experiences or any other emotion you choose for that song, but I'm just using, that specific emotion for, this conversation. But, to tap into those feelings, I think, I don't think is easy. And I think, especially in the culture that we're in right now, which is a lot of scrolling, a lot of screens, I think we're losing touch of putting our emotions out there. And I think you can even hear it in the current songwriting, when you compare it to previous generations. I think we're more focused on followers versus feelings.
Okay. No, that's facts. And, like usually like within the world of like songwriting today too, there's, situations for like ghostwriting, like references to where sometimes too like another artist would write for an artist too, but then, usually it'll be within like references or from like an experience like that might be different too. So how do you like even like pan in that artist like experience, like even when you're like the songwriter and all that too? Is it just like more like blending in like different ideas and like different moments to like come through in that sense?
Yeah, it's just it comes down to storytelling, really, and it comes down to how authentically can we tell this story in a way that will resonate with a lot of people, or their niche that they're going for,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's facts because like I know like in recent situations Drake's been accused of like having ghostwriters. The situation with Yachty's artist Caribou, like having like a reference song, that Yachty wrote. So usually like in hip hop, it does have like a lot of like negative connotations, but whereas like in other genres like pop, country, like there's not really an issue to, and it's just like finding like what can we connotate to make it more general to like the public in that sense.
Well, I don't think there's much difference between, ghostwriters in hip hop and co-writers in pop music. There are times I've been in rooms with, songwriters, and there's, 4 songwriters in the room, and 2 songwriters are really pulling the weight for that song. So, even though they wrote 90% of the song, would that be ghostwriting? I guess not, because they're still sharing the credit. But at the end of the day, it's a complex conversation, but I don't see anything wrong with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's facts. You've actually managed to be on tour with like the likes of like Alicia Keys, like OneRepublic, Jason Mraz, and like Simple Plan. So how did you manage to get into those like rooms, and like what was like that experience like, as well as like that whole like past touring experience that you've already like talked before in Asia and like other parts as well?
It was a very, very amazing experience. Again, the label that we were signed to at the time had great connections and got us all of those shows and tours, and I still thank them for that to this day. And the experiences were amazing. Being able to, watch those bands perform, hang out with them after the shows, and that experience was something I'll probably never experience again, and I'm very grateful it happened.
Yeah, that's facts. And usually it is like a different experience, just like meeting these people like in real life versus like what you see like on the TV and like, listening to the music too. So was it like a totally like different experience, just like meeting them in person versus, like seeing them like in that sense?
Yes. Yeah. Meeting every time I meet someone in person that I've maybe only knew through a screen.
Yeah.
Is very different. When you're in person, there's an energy. I'm very empathic, so I'm feeling that energy. And when you're meeting someone, you really get a chance to really get to know them on a personal level rather than just through a screen or an interview. But I learned a lot throughout my years being able to work with these A-listers, and I just want to share my knowledge with other people that are trying to make it in the industry.
Yeah, for sure, man. And like usually for touring, there's like a lot of like things like going on. So like, what are like some do's and don'ts for an artist on tour that you would like to share?
Do's and don'ts. Well, on touring can be very mentally draining. I did it for 10 years, and I had to take a break after. But I think one thing that I think you should maybe take into account when you're touring is your health. So diet is a big deal. I know when I was touring, especially early on, it was very difficult to eat healthy. So I think, making healthy choices when it comes to your diet can go a long way. Being careful when it comes to drinking too much. I know it's, very tempting, and it's one of the main things that you're served, but sometimes you don't have to drink every single day if it's there. You know what I mean? Again, going for walks, getting some exercise is very important. When you're trapped in a bus all day or a plane, it's very important to move. So those are types of things I would recommend artists do to keep their sanity on tour. Also, keeping contact with loved ones at home, I think is really important and really grounding when you're on tour. Yeah, those are just a few points that I would recommend for artists to think about when they're embarking on a tour.
Okay. And I guess like maybe like networking as well too, because like, when you're in like different cities, so you're meeting with different promoters, like venue owners, people, like even like openers for like certain shows for certain cities and all that too. So I guess it's kind of like an open room to like network, like figure out, like establish like a base from there and that.
I think networking is one of the most important things you can do as an artist or an entrepreneur. I think as artists, we need to start looking at ourselves as entrepreneurs. And unfortunately, I've met some of the most artistic musicians that I've, ever come across, and they're really not strong. Their strong suit is not being an entrepreneur. And unfortunately, in this culture where we're at right now in the music industry, you've got to put on different hats because, whereas back in the day, you can get signed to a label and then they had a team to do all of that for you. You didn't have to worry about social media. You didn't have to worry about, booking your own tour or getting your own interview or getting on the radio. Now it's kind of like most artists out there are independent. And if you can thrive as an entrepreneur in the music industry and you have a great brand and you have a great product, which is the songs, I think it's going to be a lot easier for you to gain traction and become successful in the music industry.
Okay, no, that's facts. And you're actually also at Abbey Road Studios at like one point as like the first Canadian songwriter or producer working there. Was that correct?
I don't know if I was the first Canadian, but definitely one of the first in the city of Toronto. And it was an experience, let me tell you. It was unexpected. And, the band I was hired to produce had a couple of studios in mind. And they really wanted to experience Abbey. And we flew there, and it was one of the most incredible experiences in my entire life. I learned so much. The building itself is so historic. And I'm very grateful for the fact that I even got a chance to walk through those gates. So I'll never forget that.
Okay. Have you managed to meet like, well-known people that have been like affiliated with the Beatles, like at that studio, like at that specific time?
I did. I worked with a couple of engineers there. Actually, I think Paul McCartney was having lunch there because they have this massive cafeteria underneath. It's very interesting. They serve beer. It looks very small from the outside, but once you go inside, it's actually massive. It's massive. So yeah, it was great. I got to talk to another engineer there. I work with another engineer that did a lot of the Oasis records, or one Oasis record. And he had some great stories about so many artists that came through there. And then there were stories that he heard from other engineers that used to work there, that worked with other prevalent artists in the 60s. But the whole house, the whole studio is it's just historic. There's a room full of hundreds and hundreds of microphones that they used back on all of those records. There's old amps. There's, the piano that, they used for very well-known songs there. So again, I am extremely grateful for, having that chance to experience it.
Oh, that's facts. And I mean, London, like, it is like an amazing city to like work and like even like tap in with like a lot of artists too, because a lot of like artists from like other countries have made their best works there. I mean, Bob Marley like made a good amount of his like music like in London, Amy Winehouse as well too, and like even like certain artists too, like like Spice Girls, Beyonce, and like a whole lot of other people too. So it is like crazy to see how it has like manifested into this unique like microcosm of like good music, and like them like producing like their own talent, and like having their own like labels there, like under subsidiaries and all that.
Yeah, London's a powerhouse. It's just, if you haven't been there as an artist, you've got to put it on the list, right by Nashville, and it's incredible. So I recommend anyone that is even wondering to go there, check out Camden, checked out, that's where Amy was from. And the culture there is so rich when it comes to the arts.
Yeah, that's facts, man. And, getting like moving forward for a bit too, you managed to like write for Pitbull. So how was that like, along with like the major indie record labels, and like, being in a writing group with like Duncan Cots of Our Lady Peace? So
yeah, Duncan Coots is amazing. It was such a great time in my life at that point, because I was writing in a really special writing team with Duncan and Frankie White, and we would get together and we would write for Sony ATV because Duncan had really great ties with them. And, one opportunity was Pitbull. And Pitbull would send us, or Pitbull's producer would send us the beats that they would want, and we would top line over them. If you don't know what top lining means, that just means as a songwriter, you would write the chorus, melody, and lyrics over something that they would send you, which was called a top line. So we would write top lines for them. We did about 6 songs with them, and it was a great experience. We also we were lucky enough to submit for artists like Rihanna and Christina Aguilera and a bunch of other great artists. But that was early on in my career, and it was one of the first times I really got a chance to collaborate with an A-lister, internationally. And working with Duncan was amazing. In my opinion, he is one of the best bass players in the country. He's got such an original style. If you listen to any of the Our Lady Peace records, the bass lines they really jump out at you. So he's a genius in itself. So getting to work with him and learn so much from him was such a blessing.
Yeah. That's facts. And have you also like managed to receive, like certain like plaques, like just like even at your home, or like even like when they send you to like the studio and all that too? Because a lot of artists who like get gold, platinum, even like diamond, like within like certain countries and all that too. So it must be like a different experience from there.
Yeah. I think I was supposed to get one for Fifi, but I was in touch with them, but it was COVID. I haven't really reached out. But yeah, I'm not really into awards. Or a gratification that way. But yeah, I definitely have some accolades at home. So
Okay. And which artists have you like developed like a good workflow with? And with that, does it come with like openness about like things like mental health in that sense too?
Yeah, I mean, every artist I work with, I try to develop a really strong relationship with. When I do a record with an artist, again, going back, it's not just the songwriting, but it's also, the production part, tracking vocals. I'm very, very picky when it comes to, vocals and the performance. So yeah, for me, it's really important to develop a really strong bond with whoever I'm working with, because they need to feel comfortable, not only in the room with us writing, but also, in the booth when we're recording vocals. It's really important for them to pour their heart out emotionally into the mic when they're singing or rapping, or trying to track their vocals. It's really important for me, because one of the things that is really important for me as a producer when it comes to producing vocals is the emotion that comes through. I think a lot of artists these days don't focus on the emotion that's coming through into the microphone. So, if you can get that out of the artist, I think that's you're already one step ahead.
Yeah, 'cause, like I know, like in different situations too, like a lot of them experiment with like different things, like in a sense too, like whether it's like having like different like lights in the room too, or candles, or trying like different stuff, like with weed or liquor, or like recording in different areas too. So like usually like that environment change can really shift on like how the music is like portrayed too, like whether if it would like sound like better, or if it would like sound like a little bit different as well too. So
yeah, I try to adapt to whatever makes them feel comfortable. So if they want to have crystals around the studio, that's cool, we'll do it. Burn some incense, that's cool, like some sage. If they want to smoke some weed before a session, that's fine. Like whatever makes them feel comfortable,
Okay.
Whatever they're used to. I don't have any strict rules as long as they are performing at a very high level and focused and they've done their homework, because that's another thing that I work with my artists too. It's, we don't just go in and track vocals. There's a lot of pre-production and there's a lot of focus on what we need to improve, because every artist has their strengths and their weaknesses. So, when our team is working with artists, we really target what they need to improve and give them homework and try to produce the best quality we possibly can.
Okay, that's facts. And are there like major differences, like working with like mainstream artists and like labels versus like the indie ones in that sense?
That's a good question. Yeah, there is actually. I find when I work with artists that have a little bit more experience and time under their belt, they seem at that point, I'm trying to judge which take is more stylistically appealing. Whereas a lot of the artists that I work with that are just starting out, I try to find the take that is more, it's more of a technical level that I feel should be, because it's really important that they're pouring out their emotions, but I find that the focus with independent artists typically, and there are some exceptions, are based on more theory or technical aspects. Whereas with seasoned artists, and they don't have to be on a label to be seasoned, I think it's just a lot easier because they've done it 100 times. They've been, developed by people like myself already. So at that point, when I'm listening through the takes, they all sound extremely similar, but you need to find the one that stands out. Whereas indie artists, each take, we're trying new things because they're discovering their own voice as well early on in their career. So you're almost kind of shaping the independent artists that are a little bit more new to the scene, whereas the more seasoned artists, they've had their shape, and you're just kind of trying to find the best possible, most inspiring take that sticks out.
Okay. Like, just to add on to, do you ever feel like, even in like certain situations too, like with social media and like other formats too, like the preparedness to kind of get like an album done, like with no development, do you feel like that's like some of like the reasons why artist development hasn't like improved in that sense, like now versus like before?
There's a lot of moving parts to that conversation, and I think there, actually, I had a conversation with a colleague last week, and I think a lot of artists have put songwriting to the back seat, and have prioritized social media, which is something you have to do. You have to focus on your social media following, but at the same time, it's really important that you're working on your craft. So you're learning as many instruments as possible. Or if you're a rapper, you're perfecting your flow. Your timing, it's impeccable. It's really important that you have impeccable timing. So I find a lot of artists, they might be distracted by social media, or maybe they're busy building their social media, or maybe there's just an oversaturation of music out there, and it's just harder to weed through, the ones that aren't at a level that they should be. So there's many moving parts to that conversation, but I have noticed it, and the good ones will always kind of come through. So
Yeah. It's like I've seen like, YouTube videos of like people discussing on why like the like new artists aren't really as like long lasting as like the older ones too. So like, people like Sabrina Carpenter and like Ice Spice and, Olivia, like Rodrigo, like a lot of them have like these discussions. Are they gonna like last long like in the industry in that sense too? Or do you feel like it's just gonna be all right? Is it gonna be stagnant for a bit, like where they'll have social media and
yeah. Like, when was the last time we had an artist's hit international fame that was a household name? You know, like for real. When was the last time, you know, we had like an Adele or we had, a Billie Eilish? And I think Billie Eilish may have been one of the very last few, but I don't see many rock stars. I mean, they're very niche nowadays.
Yeah.
Someone that's in the industry could not know someone who has, like 10, 20, 30, 100 million followers that are doing really great things. So I just think the industry is extremely saturated right now. Um, you know, and it's really, there's a lot of great music out there, but you've got to really weed through a lot of music that might not be so great. So, whereas before, you had, four majors, you got signed to a major, they were connected with radio, and there was like a gatekeeping system. Whereas nowadays, it's almost like the Wild West, and you still have artists like Bruno Mars and Gaga who are just killing it, which I think they released probably the best written single of the year. And you still have other artists that aren't doing so well. So,
Yeah.
it's a very interesting time in the music industry, and it's changing rapidly. And we're going to see even more changes with AI as well.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure. And to even like bring it back to like the Canadian like music industry and all that. So like even with the music scene there, do you feel like something like the old traditions, like applying for grants or seeking that stamp of approval from like CBC or Exclaim holds like artists like back in that sense too? Or do you feel like it's something that would need to work for now based on the whole system that we have here in Canada?
yeah, because of the way the system is, I don't think people need to seek that kind of, I don't know many people who listen to CBC much as anymore, compared to Spotify. I think the same goes for radio, unfortunately. And it's very interesting. I did a video on this actually on one of my reels, talking about how new music is only a very small percentage of what people listen to on streaming services. The majority, I think it's like something like 90% of listenership is dedicated to older artists. So what does that tell you, right?
Yeah.
So, but to answer your question, I mean, grants are really important, especially in Canada for artists. The system that they use, on how they choose artists, I think is a little flawed. But I've worked with many artists who have taken advantage of that opportunity and have produced some really great music. As far as Exclaim goes, I didn't even know it still existed. And again, CBC, I don't even pay attention to it anymore.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Because like I've noticed that too, like for like a while back too, like on how they'll tend to promote like certain artists too, like like the Charlotte Cardins, and also with like the Beaches and like other bands too, and like Hawaii Mighty and all these other people as well too. And like when we're looking at like someone who like break it to like the American and like international like markets too, like maybe like the closest one that we've had like a while back too was like Shawn Mendes, was like someone like The Weeknd too, and like even with some of these like newer acts too, like Talk or like Tesher in that sense too, but like the ones that they try to manufacture to make it out of Canada too, like it could be a hit or miss situation unless like they make like a hit too sometimes. And like I feel like in that opinion too, it's just like more on how like the groundwork is too, because like a lot of people feel like they need those like approvals or like that grant from Factor or from like Ontario Arts Council to kind of make it where it should be, but it has to be more on, all right, can you like make palatable music that could like reach like audiences too from different areas like aside from Canada? So that's like kind of like the question that we all have like in mind in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have that kind of mindset. But for me, and by the way, Talk has done amazing things. Like his record's awesome, dude. Those songs are killer. But I think a lot of people are too obsessed with validation. I think if they focused more on making a product or making some art that they really love and not worry about CBC or Exclaim or whoever, I just think that we would have more authentic music out there. Um, so, you know, artists and people in bands, if you're, wondering on how to make music that will appeal to the masses, and you're having your couple of releases weren't doing as well as you wanted, maybe take a different perspective and try and make something so beautiful that you would be so proud of, and not worry about, validation from, places like CBC, which I don't even know isn't very relevant anymore.
Yeah.
So do it for yourself and release something beautiful, and don't worry about external outlets.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's facts. I definitely agree too. And as far as like showcasing like certain styles, like music marketing too, like how do you feel about like the current trend nowadays too? Like even with like sampling, like artists like sampling like different like songs from like the 90s, 80s, and like even with releasing greatest hits albums and like tribute shows.
Yeah, I mean, sampling has been going on for a long time, right? I mean, hip hop's been sampling stuff forever. I think it's great. But to me, I love, creating music from nothing. You know what I mean? That's where kind of I find joy in creating. I like taking ideas and maybe making a version of that style, But for me, I don't use samples, although we might use samples within the song. Yeah. But it's art,
Yeah.
I'm cool with whatever works, and I'm open, that's one thing that I learned as a producer growing up, is being open to every single idea you possibly can think of, because it might spark another idea. At first you might not like it, but once you try it, I've had many instances where we've tried an idea where I was like, that's not going to work. And maybe it didn't work, but it sparked another idea that was the strongest hook in the song. So try not to be so judgmental when it comes to ideas, because you never know what's going to come from that specific idea.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree too, because like nowadays too, like with artists, like a lot of them are doing like samples now, like more like within hip hop, R&B, to kind of get that trend back in. Like there are like mixed reactions towards that, and like now like some artists are like even doing like greatest hits albums. Like I know I think Avril Lavigne did that. I know Emily Chapa and like Gucci Mane and like all these other people too, because like they know that with some of like the hits that these people have, maybe it could like reach on to like another audience, and like it could be like kind of like groundwork on like what they do. And like certain artists too are like even like doing the whole like tribute show to Fingas, like nowadays too, with the whole like Bruce Youngstein shows, like where they have like Tommy Youngstein. I think they also have like a Pink Floyd show every other year where they have like people from Australia like kind of do those shows. So it's like it's interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of artists would use greatest hits record as another notch on their contract. So if they were contractually bound to a label and they had to release X amount of records, they would try to eat up their quota with greatest hits. And if you don't have a record coming out and it's Christmas, what better way to make money is to regurgitate, a collection that, that you've released throughout the years. So, I'm a big fan. How long are we going to be seeing greatest hits for? I don't know. I think like I said, there's going to be big changes in the music industry. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, the biggest artists we will be listening to will be AI generated. And I think their music will be AI generated as well. I don't know how long that's going to last for, but it's definitely a phase that I think we're going to experience. And how do we deal with that? Like, how do we deal with an artist that doesn't physically exist?
Yeah.
Like,
how do you feel about that situation as well?
How do I feel about it? I don't know if I feel any which way about it, but I know that it's interesting. I'm an optimist. So when it comes to the music industry, like, look, I was in the music industry pre-digital, and I remember when Pro Tools came out, and I remember when the internet came out, and I remember, older producers being like, you know what, I'm not going to bother learning this. This is stupid, just trashing it. And they got left behind. Like, look what happened. It became the industry standard.
Yeah.
So it's really important to, when you're navigating as an artist or a producer or anybody, that you're open to change and you don't fear it, because it might be the demise of your career at that point.
I think that was like the same for like Napster too, and like other platforms as well, Spotify, like Apple Music too. Because like I remember like a lot of people, they felt like they weren't really making money from Spotify or Apple Music, or with Napster, like people are like stealing like their music without like paying and all that too. So it does come with like different mindsets from like the change of times, like in that sense. So.
Oh, 100%. And we have a problem with streaming. I think any artist will tell you that we have a problem when it comes to streaming royalties.
Okay.
And, the only way to remedy that right now is to focus on other avenues of income as an artist.
Okay.
So, focusing on sync placements, focusing on merchandise, focusing on live shows, focusing on, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
To make money, brand deals, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And using your music as kind of a free tool to navigate through those opportunities. But have songwriters been dealt a really challenging card? Yeah, of course. But, for all the young artists out there, it's been going on even before this. Songwriters weren't happy with the royalties they were collecting when CDs were out either. So, it's been an ongoing issue, and it seems like it's getting worse and worse. So, it's important that we talk about it.
That's facts. And, we could like even like take it like back home too with the whole Toronto GTA like Canadian like music scene too. So how do you feel about it right now? And do you feel like that there should be some changes on the direction of where the Toronto GTA like Canadian music scene should go?
Well, there has been changes, I'll tell you that. I think COVID did a number on the industry. I can't even count how many venues have shut down since, and they didn't reopen. I think there's a lack of community. I think there's a lack of education. I think artists need guidance and mentorship in this city, and I think that's extremely lacking. And I can see it going to shows. I can see that artists are kind of doing their own thing, which is great, but I just wish there was a bit more education behind how to release a record properly, what to have prepared. What does an industry standard look like when it comes to a drop?
Yeah. These
are all very important things that, yes, the education is out there, but, you have to search through for it. Whereas I would hope one day Toronto's community will produce a bit more on the mentorship side when it comes to education on how to thrive as an artist.
That's facts. Because like there are like programs like the Remix Project and like Metalworks and like I think Abstract Learning, like they have that for like certain artists as well too. And then like they'll have like the production camps. Like I think there's like one at Young and Wesley, I think too, where like they have like a program for producers and all that. And like even all the schools like with Seneca, Humber, like I think they do have that, but it's like, can we apply it more? Because like now I think to say it like with more, like I think everyone's like trying to become like an artist like nowadays too, like because of like Six Buzz and all these other platforms too, like when we're talking about Toronto music, because they see their friend do it, they feel like they could do it, and then they just try their best to interpret like music in their own idea. And maybe it's like not like the way that how people like should listen to it, where it's like the traditional format, like learning how to like play like an instrument, or knowing notes, or like playing from a certain perspective, or having like educators or tutors like teaching you about the music in that sense. So
Yeah. And look, like these schools are great, but they also cost a lot of money. They're timely. And some of the information that they teach in these schools, it's outdated. A lot of the professors, and look, like there's a lot you can gain from school, from going to school for music. But on the flip side, a lot of these professors are not currently engaged in the music industry. So by the time information translates from the culture to the curriculum, it's such a rapidly changing industry that you almost have to kind of tweak that curriculum again. And that goes for business school too. I've heard people say, you go to university and if you take a business course, by the fourth year, the first 2 or 2.5 years are expired anyway. They've completely changed.
yeah.
So, the same with the music industry. It's changing so rapidly that if you don't have anybody that's currently in the depths of, the industry and experiencing it as it's changing, it's really difficult to really, have certain conversations about topics that are really important.
Yeah, it's facts. And I actually want to bring it back to like the idea of like networking and all that too, because I know that you said that networking with like artists like is like important too, and like even just like shows and all that too. So do you even like feel like going to like different cities, events or conventions, like do you hold that like importance like that very high?
Yeah, very much so. Networking got me to where I am. I still go to events every week. I think networking is very important, but if you want to take a step back from that, I think it's like putting in the time and the work to network is more important. So I find a lot of artists, look, like it depends on how bad you want it. When I was young, I made a list of every single conference in North America that I could get to. I made a list of every single person that I wanted to contact, whether it was through email or LinkedIn or whatever it was. And I would send out like 40 to 80 messages a week. Easy. I wouldn't get, not every single one would reply, but the ones that did served me. So it's very important that once you have your products in place, your music is at a place where, you feel confident behind it, and your marketing's there, your branding's there, and you've put the work in working with a team that could get you to a point where your music is at an industry standard, then go out there and meet people, because you never know what opportunities lie.
Yeah, no, that's facts.
Yeah.
Like I went to like Canadian Music Week like some years back too, and like I've managed to meet like Brian Michael Cox and like people who have like their own like radio programs and all that type of stuff too. Because I actually used to manage like an artist like a little bit too. I don't anymore too, and like there was like some like interesting factors like to like look into. Are you willing to travel to like a different country or city to meet with that person, like with the budget that you might have, or like do you feel like what you're pitching might be the best like on what's required, or are there like other factors like involved too, like knowing like how to deal with like labels, like knowing how to figure out your distribution deal, all that type of stuff too. So there's like a lot of things to like take into, and like I think with networking, it works well when you're going to like these like different cities too, because every city is going to be different based on like their music scene, their cultures, rules, precedents, like all that type of stuff. So
Absolutely. And, one thing I would like to add on to that is when you're networking within these channels, I think it's really important to find someone who you resonate with and use them as a mentor. I think mentorship, is very important. In this digital age, it's a lot easier to have mentors who maybe that you've never met, but I think it's also valuable to have mentors that you do work with. I had an amazing mentor growing up. he's mentored some of the biggest names in the industry. And I feel very grateful to have been mentored under him. He was extremely tough. He also mentored Noah Shabib,
Okay.
40, and you'll hear him talk about Gadget every now and then, and Gadget didn't mentor many people, very small few people, but I was lucky to be in that group with 40, and I was lucky to be in that group with other prevalent artists like Socrates and other artists. But I learned a lot from him, and the one main thing I learned from him was standards. His standards were so high. It was so trying to reach his standard got me to a point to greatness. So I think having an honest mentor that will tell you tell you the way that it is really important in the development of you as an artist or a producer or any occupation, really.
Yeah, that's facts. Like, especially with the whole Gadget part too, because I've actually had someone on the podcast a while back that actually used to be like mentored by Gadget, like within the production side. Adrian Turbo VCR Gariba, like who's like a dope producer, like that has like worked with like a lot of like upcoming artists like in Toronto. So it is like interesting to see like that connection too. And like I think he also worked with like a lot of people like within the remix projects with like Pyrex, Pilly B, like those like artists as well too. So.
Yeah, like if you were mentored by Gadget, you're probably successful. People called him the godfather of hip hop in the country. He was mixing stuff for Drake before, 40 was even involved. And that's how 40 got in with Drake was through Gaj. So, I miss him a lot, but, he's really, he really got me to a level, where I could be confident of who I was as a producer. And again, his tactics might be a little old school and aggressive, but it's that old school militant kind of
feeling that you need. Yeah, that's facts,
it's like Gordon Ramsay. It's like sometimes you just got to be told, you know,
exactly
how shitty you are.
Yeah, no, that's facts, man. And I want to like speak like a little bit like briefly on it too. But like you've actually worked with like Gary Vee and like American Idol. So how was that like?
Well, Gary Vee was that his whole team is really cool. I was actually working with an artist. I was co-managing an artist with a good friend of mine, Rick Barker. Rick has a very amazing podcast. He's out of Nashville. He launched Taylor Swift's career. And we met at a conference we were both speaking at, and he really liked what I was doing. I was developing a young artist named Max Parker at the time. And he was like, I really like what you're doing with that kid. He's like, I have an artist that I think we could work together on. So we ended up working with, this artist, and she was a influencer. She had a big following, and we brought in a good friend of mine, Matt Anthony, out of Niagara Falls, who's an amazing entrepreneur, and another lawyer who also worked with The Weeknd and stuff. And we worked with this influencer, and we got her some great brand deals. And one of the brand deals that approached us was Gary Vee had a pair of K-Swiss shoes out. And he wanted us to have our artist model them. So it was really cool. He added us to his influencer circle. That was really cool. American Idol was very, very, very interesting. Our artist, same person, she was the first Canadian in history to get a golden ticket, which was really cool. But meeting Lionel Richie was really cool, and hanging out with Ryan Seacrest. I mean, these are heavy hitters in the industry. They're hard workers. They've accomplished so much. So it was such a eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
And we got to spend time in Savannah, Georgia, which is just so beautiful there.
And I think one thing I could say about like American Idol too is that it has like rebuilt like a lot of like careers like nowadays too, with like Simon Cowell, Randy Jackson, Paula Abdul, and like even with some like the winners like Fantasia with Carrie Underwood, you know, with Kelly Clarkson, Ruben Studdard, you know, I think Taylor Hicks as well too, Jordan Sparks, Sturgill Simpson, I think too, and like even people who were like in that scene too with the Jennifer Hudsons and like the Clay Aikens and the Bo Bices and like I mean David Archuleta and like all these like other people too. So it is like very interesting to see from all those other aspects too. So
Yeah, they really spawned a lot of talent out there. You know, for better or for worse. I mean, they really put a dent in the industry when it comes to how things are looked at. You know,
yeah,
you had this contest come, and all of a sudden they're churning out these singers, and these singers are becoming massive.
yeah.
I still remember Kelly Clarkson, like, you know, and
Canadian Idol, like even like having a spinoff too, where I mean they've had like some good people too. I mean Eva Avila, Carly Rae Jepsen, the infamous Jacob
did
Hogard.
Carly Rae win it?
I don't think so. I think she was a part of it, but
Okay.
too, but like I think she was just like there, and then I think that was it too, and then Jacob Hogard, which I don't want to like dive into, and like a lot of other people.
Yeah, let's not dive into him.
Yeah,
But yeah, and you know, Carly did some great things.
yeah,
And that's another thing I would like to touch upon is the age thing. You know, she actually, by the time she was out there doing pop music, she wasn't, you know, she was a little bit on the older side, which I want to stress to artists, and I did a video on this, did very well. You know, a lot of artists are very insecure about that. And I remember growing up as an artist being really insecure about that. There's no time limit, guys. Like, I don't know where this came from. I don't know who still says it, but you know, if you're churning out good music, I don't know why there would be a limit on an age, you know? Yeah, there's niches, but at the end of the day, like there are no rules in this music industry. So if you're wanting to put out a record and you're in your 30s and you 40s and you want to do a pop record, go for it. Don't let, you know, fear of something so minuscule like your age be a factor that makes you walk away from an experience that could change your life.
yeah. That's facts. And like I can like even add that too. I think you know people who start off at a very old age, you know, tend to become like more like prevalent like within music for like a long lasting time too, because you have like people like Killer Mike, you have people like Danny Brown, you even have like people like Adele and like all these other people who start off like early 20s, like late 20s, early 30s, like mid 30s too, and like they progress to a point where you know they become successful. Like even I think not Bob Dylan, I think Neil Young. Neil Young started, I think, in his 40s too, and like they tend to take time with their music and just like let it grow through like the maturity and for the sound too. I think with people who start off like very young too, like they tend to deal with like a lot more stress like later on towards like the career too, whether they tend to like fall back on it completely with like someone like Justin Bieber or like some that kind of crash out in a bit too, like with like Lil Mama and like I think with Aaron Carter who started out like very young, like in their teens and all that too. So
yeah, there's pros and cons for all of that kind of things, you know, and I feel for the artists that were entrenched in the entertainment industry at an extremely young age where they should have been, you know, being a kid.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, on the flip side, being, you know, even myself starting at such a young age, I didn't have the fame that like Timberlake did at, you know, his age, but I did have the experience of working with, you know, some of the best producers in the country and being mentored at such a young age through Chris Smith Management and the team there. You know, I don't think my talent level would be where it's at if I didn't have that development at such a young age.
Okay. Oh, that's facts, man. And you know, I just have like some of these like last topics for a bit too. So, like, what would be some great advice that you would give to like any aspiring like songwriters or producers that we haven't like really tackled on for a bit?
Well, we tackled on a lot of stuff. But again, I just want to go back and say, stop making music for other people. If you and your small team that you're making music with are really excited about what you're doing, 9 times out of 10, the public will be. Don't release anything out there. Okay. Like, I know there are some people who say, you know what, if you record it, release it, just release everything. Like, I don't play by that game. I think if you're going to release something, make sure you're proud of it. Make sure it's at a certain standard. If you're serious about taking on the music industry as a career, you have to make sure that you're treating it like a business, like anything else. You're not going to open up a restaurant and serve mediocre food at the beginning and wait for a bigger following or more customers to serve better food, right? How do you get those customers? You serve quality food at the very beginning and it'll catch on. So I think that is one thing that artists really need to be careful of, because, depending on your goals, people might listen to that first single or second single and say, yeah, it's not really where it should be. And then the second chance that you get, they might say, well, we already heard that artist. I'm not really interested in hearing anything else.
It's facts. No, I definitely agree too. And like, as far as like, what do you have like going on next? Like, what do you have going on like at the moment, or like going on next? And do you have any like other closing remarks to say?
Yeah, well, I'm starting a bunch of new records in this quarter, which I'm really excited about. But the one really special thing that I'm working on right now that I'm really excited about is actually an online course dedicated to songwriting. So I've developed with a production team this course, and it's going to be between 10 and 15 hours. You're going to get a certificate after, and it covers everything that you need to know about songwriting. Anything that comes to the history, to the, structure, to the melody, to the lyrics, to how to brand yourself as a songwriter. It covers everything. And I've been putting my heart and soul into this course because I wanted to leave a little bit of a legacy behind. And I think putting down everything I know about songwriting into a course to try to teach people, I think was a great decision, because for me, it's one of the most important things that I've started to do with my life into my 40s is mentor young producers and artists. And what better way to reach as many as I possibly can is with this course. So it's going to be very affordable and helpful for anyone who wants a different perspective when it comes to leveling up their songwriting game. So I'm really excited about that right now.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that. And Andre, it was a pleasure having you on, man. Like, just like knowing about the knowledge, like knowing about like your life story, everything else too. It's amazing to hear. And like, I definitely wish like nothing but the best for you, for your journey, for what you have for your platform, and like even for like all the other releases that you have going on. And definitely have you back, So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this experience. And if anybody's out there listening to this, and you're an artist, it's a marathon. So don't quit. Keep releasing music, and always refrain back to the reason why you started. I think grounding yourself when it comes to the reasoning of your artistic endeavors is really, really important, and will in turn help produce better product. So
it's facts, man. Yeah. I definitely agree, And this is Josh, also known as Yashu, of episode 102 of the TLOY Talks podcast. You can get this on all platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Buzzsprout, much more. Patreon. Check out Andre's work. Check out his social media. He'll be dropping like a lot of reels like every other day, like to get that knowledge on how to make it in the industry, to know about the styles, everything else too going on. And yeah, definitely check out the course series like when it's out. And yeah, this episode 102 with Josh, also known as Yashu, with Andre Kaden Black of the TLOY Talks podcast, signing off.